nerfed beyond belief in 2. The new health types keep the abilities from working until you get past them, which wouldn't be a problem if it weren't for the fact that the most prominent health type is shields, and Adepts have no way of dealing with them naturally.
Not to mention you're stuck using SMGs and pistols for most of the game, the Shuriken and Predator. Awful, just awful.
Adept powers are still useful on higher difficulties. You just use the power to momentarily stun the opponent so you can crack their defenses.
While true, that's still pretty mid. On easier difficulties, Adept has the best crowd control, but the second you hit hardcore, it's over for you. All of your abilities besides warp are basically useless. Not to mention you have no way of replenishing your barrier like some of the other classes do, making Adept squishier than it was in Mass Effect 1.
Put Mass Effect 2 Adept in F tier. It is way too unenjoyable in 2. If you're playing on any difficulty that isn't normal, you legit need energy drain to make the class playable.
Absolutely not. Adept is still a great class in 2. You can't deny it still has its uses.
I'll settle for D tier. I think Adept has its place in Mass Effect.
What the fuck?
Okay, the Three Stooges, I have come here to guide you to the right path. Yes, Barak, the Adept skills are less effective against opponents protected with kinetic shields, but to say that this class does not have innate ways to destroy shields is an exaggeration. The main skill of the Adept, which helps Adept overcome shields, is called a gun. In Mass Effect 2, rapid-fire weapons such as the submachine gun and assault rifles deal bonus damage to shields. In case of M9 Tempest and M4 Shuriken, that is 50% more damage to shields from the very beginning of the game. Additionally, after researching shield piercing upgrade, damage done by SMGs to shields is increased to an additional 50%, which is effectively doubles damage done by all SMGs to shields. Second Adept skill that work against shields is Singularity. If evolved into Heavy Singularity, this skill will hold and repeatedly stagger protected enemies, even strong one like the Harbinger and Scions. But more importantly, Heavy Singularity will hold in place and stagger enemies protected by shields. Let's look at this situation. The enemy is pushing me, my teammates' anti-shield skills is on cooldown. First, I cast Singularity on the pushing enemy, which holds him in place, giving me the chance to shot him in the head, which quickly breaks his shield. Once his shield is depleted, Singularity rises him into the air, and I detonate him with the warp, killing him and doing bonus damage to every enemy in the blast radius. In other words, to deal with kinetic shield, Adept just needs to use a gun and Heavy Singularity. So, Barak, when you say that Adept can't naturally counter kinetic shields, you are over-exaggerating the problem. You need to stop blowing yourself up with M920 cane all the time. I think the brain trauma from explosions is starting to affect your judgment. Now, let me dismantle the allegations of the Adept being a squishy caster with no options to replenish shields. While it is true that Adept do not have skills to replenish shields from the very start of the game, nevertheless, just after 2 Medigel upgrades, any class in the game can unlock an upgrade called Trauma Module, which makes Medigel fully heal and replenish shields of player and squad mates on use. With how many Medigel kits you can find through the missions, there is no reason not to use it for emergency healing. Also, Adept has no reason not to pick up Jacob Barrier skill since you can do his loyalty mission so early in the game. Because of that, Barak, when you and Donald are yapping about Adept being squishy, all I hear is a sound of skill issue. And since when Mass Effect 2 became a solo adventure? The game mechanics expects from player to choose squad companions whose skills will compensate weaknesses of Shepard's class. And although Adept is weak against kinetic shields, he is strong against everything else. Armor, biotic barriers, and health. Adept has the skills to quickly destroy them all. So to compensate for Adept's weakness against shields, player just need to select squad companions with abilities like Overload or Disruptor ammo. Alternatively, Shepard can learn Energy Drain after completing Tali Loyalty mission, which would make Adept into a killing machine capable to soloing all types of protection in the entire game. But even without Shepard learning energy drain, a proper companion selection is what make Adept squad perfectly capable to deal with anything that insanity difficulty can throw at them. I mean, it's kind of weird how the Three Stooges ranked Mass Effect 2 classes by completely removing the squad element from the equation in a squad-based game. Also, just imagine if Adept, who by default can destroy 3 out 4 types of health, could, from the very start of the game, also deal with shields. It would make Adept to be way too broken. So being weak against kinetic shields is completely fine for Adept, and should not be a reason to put this class below A tier. Speaking of selecting companions to compensate for the Shepard's class weaknesses, some classes have more weaknesses than others. For example, Vanguard, the class whose dick Donald has not taken out of his mouth for the 3rd game in a row, does not have the skills Disruptor, Ammo or Overload, which makes Vanguard even weaker than the Adept in fighting against enemies protected with shields. Vanguard can only fight kinetic shields with the same methods as the Adept, by shooting them with a gun. But unlike the Adept, the Vanguard has neither the warp to biotically detonate a group of foes nor the singularity to stop and hold in place enemies covered by protection. I do not know what Donald is smoking in order to drool over a class that has only 2 practically useful skills, charge and incendiary ammo. The fact that Barrack put Vanguard above Adept in Mass Effect 2 is one more proof that being President of the USA is a mental debuff. As for Donald boasting about Vanguard greatness, I guarantee that if you take away Vanguard's crutch, which is the Geth shotgun, Donald would get stunlock in Garrus' basement section until he gets killed more times than Joe died in Mass Effect 1 and 2 combined. Bro constantly boasts about him being FPS God, only then to instantly self-report as a fraud and filthy shotgun Andy by calling M9 Tempest a bad weapon. He probably only plays with weapons like the M12 Locust or M96 Mattock, both of which are DLC weapons with inflated stats, so the big guy has no idea how to control the spread and recoil of base game weapons like the M9 Tempest. Putting aside Donald's inability to use any weapon except shotguns and pay-to-win DLC bullshit, it is also worth pointing out that all classes that do not have the skills to destroy shields have the same level of difficulty in dealing with those shields, just as the Adept. Now let me tell you about the pros of Adept class in Mass Effect 2 and why it deserves to be in at least A tier. First of all, as I said earlier, the Adept skillset makes this class somewhat versatile, capable of dealing with 3 types of health found in the game without help from squad mates. And while, indeed, Adept is weak against kinetic shields, Adept can compensate for this weakness by being good at using SMGs and utilizing the holding effect of heavy singularity or using squad mates with anti-kinetic shield skills. Additionally, if so desired, Adept can learn the skill Energy Drain, which, when combined with Adept's own class skills, would make Adept truly universal class, capable of dealing with all types of enemies' protections found in the game. Secondly, Adept is the best class in the game for creating biotic explosions. If a target affected by pulse, singularity, or slam then gets hit by warp, that target will detonate, taking double damage from warp. All enemies caught in the blast radius take full damage of warp, regardless of any protection they might have. Enemies with protection will get staggered for a couple of seconds. Unprotected enemies will be knocked down or sent flying. If an unprotected target that got caught in the biotic explosion is also affected by pulse, singularity, or slam, then that target also will take double damage from warp. Those biotic combos are what makes Adept strong in Mass Effect 2. Both Sentinel and Adept have warp, but only Adept also has pull and singularity, which means that Adept can create biotic explosions on his own without wasting much longer cooldowns of squad mates. This self-sufficiency, along with significantly shorter cooldowns on Shepard's skills, enables Adept to fully leverage the biotic explosion mechanic. For example, Adept can combine the short cooldown of a squad mate's pull with Adept's short cooldown of warp to produce multiple biotic explosions in a short period of time. Alternatively, Adept can use Singularity or Pull to set up explosions for squad mates to detonate. Look at an example of a standard Adept combo. At the beginning of the fight, I burn the kinetic shields of the mercenary with overload, then throw the Singularity that lifts most enemies in the air, and then finish them all with warp detonation, which kills most enemies and wounds those that survived. This combo dealt massive damage to the entire group of enemies, practically killing the entire group. Biotic explosions like that are what allow Adept to clear even the biggest groups of enemies with ease, especially when fighting against collectors, who all use only armor and barriers. And while there are only a few missions with collectors, those few missions are universally considered to be amongst the hardest in the game, but Adept clears all of those missions with ease. To wrap this up, I would like to emphasize that playing on Insanity difficulty in Mass Effect 2 as an Adept requires a thorough understanding of the game. This is why many players mistakenly perceive the Adept class as significantly weaker than it truly is. However, when played skillfully, the Adept in Mass Effect 2 offers some of the most enjoyable and rewarding gameplay experiences. Playing as an Adept necessitates that players pay close attention to enemy positioning, strategically plan which skills to use, and select the most suitable weapon for each situation. Consequently, the Adept class provides a gameplay style that effectively blends skill usage with gunplay. In contrast to more combat-focused classes like Soldier, Infiltrator, or Vanguard, which primarily rely on their weapon selection and the passive effects of ammunition types, the Adept class stands out. Additionally, unlike the Engineer or Sentinel classes, which cannot fully capitalize on biotic explosion mechanics, the Adept excels in this area. For all these reasons, Adept in Mass Effect 2 deserves to be in A tier.